What happens when a comedy legend walks onto a daytime talk show and the conversation takes a turn no one in the room was fully prepared for? Make sure to subscribe to the Star Talks and like and comment for more talk show coverage. So the energy is already high before Eddie even walks out. The audience is clapping. There's that familiar buzz you get when a big name is about to hit the stage. You can hear people calling out his name, a few whistles, some laughter even before he says a word. The hosts are smiling. Joy is already leaning back in her chair with that half-amused, half-curious look she tends to have when she knows the conversation could go anywhere. Eddie Murphy walks out, relaxed, smiling, waving to the audience. He does a quick pause, takes it in, nods like he appreciates the moment, and sits down. You can tell immediately he's in a good mood, joking with the hosts before the first question even lands. One of the co-hosts starts it off light, asking about his recent projects, what he's been working on, how it feels to still be such a huge presence after all these years. Eddie answers smoothly, casually, throwing in humor here and there. The audience laughs easily, nothing forced. It feels comfortable. Joy jumps in early, smiling but with that sharp tone she's known for. "So Eddie, you've been around a long time. And I mean that in a good way," she says, getting a quick laugh from the audience. "But comedy has changed. A lot. Do you ever feel like you have to hold back now compared to before?" There's a slight pause. Not awkward, but noticeable. Eddie tilts his head just a little, like he's deciding how honest he wants to be. "Well, I think the world changes, right?" he says. "And comedy kind of moves with it, or it tries to." Joy leans in. "But do you think it's better now? Or more restricted?" The tone shifts just a bit. Not tense yet, but you can feel the conversation stepping into something more serious. Eddie smiles, but it's more measured now. "I think people are more aware now. That's not a bad thing. But sometimes, yeah, it can feel like you gotta think a little harder before you say something." A few audience members murmur, some nodding. Joy raises her eyebrows. "Think harder, or censor yourself?" There it is. The first real push. Eddie lets out a small laugh. "Depends who you ask." The audience laughs, but there's a slight edge now. You can feel people paying closer attention. Another host tries to soften it. "But you've always pushed boundaries, right? That's part of your style." Eddie nods. "Yeah, but pushing boundaries back then, it was different. The reaction was different." Joy cuts in again, quick. "Or maybe people just didn't call it out the same way." A few claps from the audience. Some om-hom sounds. Eddie looks at her directly now. Still calm, but more focused. "Or maybe people understood jokes were jokes." That line lands. The audience reacts louder this time. Some applause, some mixed reactions. Joy doesn't back off. "But jokes can hurt people too, Eddie. That's the point." Now the energy shifts again. You can feel it in the room. The easy laughter is gone, replaced with that kind of quiet attention where everyone's waiting to see what happens next. Eddie leans back slightly in his chair, hands together. "Sure, anything can hurt somebody. But if you start looking at everything through that lens, then comedy kind of loses what it is." The audience gives a mix of applause and hesitation. Joy shakes her head slightly. "Or maybe comedy evolves into something smarter." A co-host jumps in quickly, sensing the tension building. "I think there's a balance, right? Between being funny and being respectful." But Joy keeps going. "Because let's be honest, some of the stuff from back in the day, it wouldn't fly now. And maybe that's a good thing." Eddie smiles again, but it's tighter now. "Or maybe people just got more sensitive." That line gets a bigger reaction. Some people clap loudly. Others go quiet. You can even hear a few scattered, "oh" reactions. Joy leans forward immediately. "Or maybe people finally had a voice." There's a brief pause. Even the co-hosts go quiet for a second. Eddie nods slowly. "That's fair. But having a voice doesn't mean everything has to be serious all the time." The audience reacts again, this time more evenly split. Another host tries to lighten it. "Okay, we're getting deep already," she says with a laugh. "We just started." The audience laughs, but it doesn't fully break the tension. Joy smiles, but she's not backing down. "I just think it's important to acknowledge that humor has consequences." Eddie responds quickly this time. "Everything has consequences. Not just humor." There's a slight shift in tone again. Faster now. Less space between responses. Joy says, "But humor reaches people in a different way." Eddie replies, "Exactly. That's why it matters that it stays honest." A few audience members clap again. Joy crosses her arms slightly. "Honest or unchecked?" Eddie exhales lightly, still calm but clearly engaged now. You can't have honest without risking somebody not liking it. The audience reacts with a mix of applause and murmurs. One of the co-hosts finally steps in more firmly. Okay, I think what we're really talking about is where the line is, right? Joy nods, but keeps her eyes on Eddie. Exactly. And who decides that line? Eddie answers without hesitation. The audience. Always. That gets a strong reaction, applause, a few cheers. Joy tilts her head. But the audience changes. Eddie nods. Yeah. And comedians adjust, but they shouldn't disappear. That line lands hard. The audience responds louder this time. There's a brief moment where no one speaks. The kind of pause that only happens when a conversation has clearly shifted from casual to something more real. Then one of the co-hosts smiles and tries again to ease things. Okay, we might need a part 2 of this conversation, she jokes. The audience laughs, but the tension is still there, just under the surface. Joy finally leans back slightly, but she's still watching Eddie closely. We're just getting started. Eddie smiles back. Yeah, I can tell. The audience laughs again, but now there's anticipation in it. You can feel it. This isn't just a normal interview anymore. Something deeper is building, and everyone in the room knows it. The audience laughter fades, but the energy doesn't drop. It actually tightens. You can feel that shift where everyone knows this isn't just a light celebrity interview anymore. The smiles are still there, but now they're mixed with curiosity. One of the co-hosts tries to steer things just slightly. Okay, so Eddie, let's talk about your new project, because that's why you're here, she says with a light laugh, clearly trying to reset the tone. Eddie nods, smiling. Yeah, let's talk about something safe, he jokes. The audience laughs, and for a second it feels like things might settle down. She continues, you've been working on this new film, and people are really excited. What made you want to come back to this kind of role? Eddie relaxes a bit, leaning forward. Honestly, it was about timing. I've been doing this a long time, and now I just pick things that feel right. Stuff that I actually enjoy. The audience nods along, a few claps here and there. Another host adds, and fans love seeing you back in that comedic space. There's a lot of nostalgia there too. Eddie smiles. Yeah, nostalgia is powerful. People remember how things made them feel. Joy jumps back in, not aggressively, but with intention. But nostalgia can also be selective, right? People remember the laughs, but maybe not the parts that didn't age well. There's a small ripple through the audience, not loud but noticeable. Eddie glances at her, still calm. That's true, but that's also life. Everything doesn't age perfectly. Joy nods, but she's not letting go. Right, but when you look back at some of your older material, do you ever think, I wouldn't say that today? There's a pause again, this time a little longer. Eddie shifts in his seat slightly. Yeah, there are things I wouldn't do the same way now. The audience murmurs, some surprised, some approving. Joy leans in. So then doesn't that prove the point? That the change is necessary? Eddie nods slowly. It proves that I've changed. It doesn't mean everything back then was wrong. That answer gets a mixed reaction. A few claps, a few quiet murmurs. One of the co-hosts quickly adds, I think that's an important distinction. But Joy raises her hand slightly, not interrupting rudely, but clearly signaling she's not finished. But Eddie, when people say it was a different time, sometimes that sounds like an excuse. Now the audience reacts more strongly. A few yeah voices, some clapping. Eddie's smile fades just a little. Not angry, just more serious. Or it's context. The word lands clean. Joy responds immediately. Context doesn't erase impact. There's a louder reaction now. The tension is fully back. Eddie nods once. And impact doesn't erase intent. That line hits harder. The audience reacts, louder applause, but also a few scattered disagreements you can hear in the background. Another host jumps in quickly. Okay, this is a really interesting conversation because... But Joy continues, now more direct. But intent doesn't matter if people are hurt. Eddie turns slightly toward her, his tone still controlled but firmer. It matters to the person who said it. The audience goes quiet for a second. That kind of silence where people are processing. Joy shakes her head. That sounds like avoiding responsibility. Eddie lets out a small breath. No, it sounds like understanding that communication goes both ways. A few claps break out again. The co-host in the middle tries again to balance things. I think what we're seeing here is two perspectives that actually exist in the real world. Joy cuts in, but not loudly. I just don't think comedians should get a pass because they're joking. Now Eddie leans forward slightly, elbows near his knees. This is the first time his posture really changes. Nobody's asking for a pass. The audience is completely locked in now. Joy responds, "Then what are you asking for?" Eddie answers without hesitation. "Understanding." That word lands heavy. Joy tilts her head. "Understanding for who?" Eddie meets her gaze. "For everybody." A brief pause follows. You can hear someone in the audience clap slowly, then others join in. Joy doesn't clap. She watches him closely. But historically, everybody hasn't always been treated equally in comedy. The room reacts again, more murmurs, a few louder voices. Eddie nods. "That's true, but that's a bigger issue than just comedy." Joy responds quickly, "But comedy reflects culture." Eddie replies, "And it also challenges it." That gets a strong reaction, applause, a few cheers. One of the co-hosts smiles, trying to diffuse the intensity again. "Okay, I feel like we're in a college debate right now," she says with a light laugh. The audience laughs too, but it's brief. Joy smiles slightly, but her tone stays serious. "I'm just saying, with the platform you've had, there's influence there." Eddie nods. "Of course there is." Joy follows up. "So shouldn't that come with more responsibility?" Eddie pauses for a second, then answers carefully. "It comes with responsibility, but it also comes with freedom." That line splits the room again. Applause on one side, quieter reactions on the other. Joy leans back slightly, crossing her arms again. "Freedom without accountability doesn't work." Eddie responds calmly. "And accountability without freedom doesn't work either." The audience reacts louder this time, more engaged than ever. Another host steps in, a bit more assertive now. "Okay, I think what's fascinating here is that both of you are actually making valid points." Joy nods, but adds, "I just think the balance has been off for a long time." Eddie replies, "And I think it's overcorrecting now." That line creates the biggest reaction so far. Audible whoa sounds, louder applause, and a few scattered disagreements. The tension is now undeniable. Joy leans forward again, more focused than before. "Overcorrecting or finally correcting?" Eddie looks at her, steady. "Depends where you're standing." The audience goes quiet again. That line hangs in the air. For a moment, no one jumps in. Even the hosts seem to hesitate, letting the moment breathe. Then one of them finally says softly, This is why conversations like this matter." A few audience members clap. But the mood has fully shifted now. This isn't just a discussion. It feels personal, layered, and real. Joy looks out at the audience briefly, then back at Eddie. "I just think people expect more now." Eddie nods slightly. "And that's okay." Joy raises an eyebrow. "But you don't agree with all of it." Eddie gives a small smile. "I don't have to." The audience reacts again, a mix of laughter and applause. The co-host quickly jumps in again. "Okay, we're going to take a quick break." But before she can finish, Joy adds one more line, looking directly at Eddie. "And the audience doesn't have to agree with you either." Eddie nods. They never did. That line gets a strong reaction, louder than before. The tension doesn't explode, but it settles into something even more intense, a quiet standoff built on mutual conviction. As the cameras prepare to cut, the audience is still buzzing, still reacting, still choosing sides in real time. And it's clear now, this conversation is far from over. The show comes back from break, and you can feel it instantly. The atmosphere hasn't reset. If anything, it's heavier now. The audience claps as the cameras roll again, but it's not the same light applause from earlier. It's more controlled, more aware. People are leaning forward in their seats. One of the co-hosts smiles at the camera. "Welcome back. We're here with Eddie Murphy, and as you can see, we're having a very real conversation today." There's a ripple of laughter, but it's brief. Eddie nods slightly, composed. Joy is already looking at him, not in a confrontational way, but clearly ready to continue. Another host tries to ease things in. "During the break, we were still talking about this, because it's clearly something people feel strongly about." Joy jumps in, but her tone is a little more measured now. "Yeah, because it's not just about comedy. It's about influence, culture, and what people take away from what they hear." Eddie listens, nodding once. "I agree with that." That response catches a few people off guard. You can hear a soft murmur in the audience. Joy notices it too. "You agree?" Eddie smiles slightly. "Yeah, I've never said comedy doesn't have impact. It does." The audience relaxes just a touch, not fully, but enough to shift the tone from confrontation to something more layered. Joy leans in. "Okay, so if it has impact, then where do you draw the line personally?" Eddie pauses for a second, thinking. For me, it's about intention and awareness. I don't go out there trying to hurt people. Joy responds quickly, but not sharply. But you understand that sometimes it happens anyway. Eddie nods. Yeah, and when it does, you learn from it. That gets a small round of applause. One of the co-hosts adds, and you've actually addressed some of your past material publicly, right? Eddie nods again. Yeah, I have. Joy turns slightly toward the audience, then back to Eddie. And that took time. It didn't happen right away. Eddie accepts that. That's true. There's a moment where the tone softens. Not because the disagreement is gone, but because there's a bit more acknowledgement on both sides. But then Joy adds, and that's kind of my point. Change doesn't happen unless people push for it. The tension edges back in, subtle but clear. Eddie responds calmly. Or unless people grow on their own. The audience reacts again, not as loud as before, but engaged. Joy shakes her head slightly. People don't always grow unless they're challenged. Eddie leans back a bit, considering that. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they don't. But forcing it, that can backfire. A few audience members clap. Joy raises an eyebrow. So you think accountability is forcing? Eddie answers carefully. I think there's a difference between accountability and pressure. Now the audience is really listening again. That quiet, focused kind of attention. Joy follows up. And where do you think the line is between those two? Eddie exhales lightly. When people stop listening and just start reacting. That line lands in a different way, not explosive but thoughtful. You can hear a few reactions in the audience. One of the co-hosts nods. That's interesting. Joy tilts her head. But reactions come from somewhere. People don't just react for no reason. Eddie nods. I agree. But not every reaction is the full picture either. There's a pause. Not tense, more reflective. Another host jumps in, trying to widen the conversation. Do you think social media has made this more intense? That question shifts the energy slightly. Eddie gives a small laugh. Of course it has. The audience laughs too, a bit more naturally this time. Joy nods. That's true. Everything is amplified now. Eddie continues. Back in the day, if somebody didn't like a joke, you might hear about it, eventually. Now it's instant. And it's loud. The audience reacts with agreement, claps, a few voices. Joy adds, but that also gives people a chance to speak up. Eddie doesn't disagree. Yeah, and that's important. I'm not against that. That moment creates a slight shift. The conversation feels less like a clash and more like two perspectives trying to exist at the same time. But then Eddie adds, I just think sometimes it turns into a pile-on instead of a conversation. That line changes the energy again. Joy leans forward slightly. Or maybe it feels like a pile-on because people are finally being heard all at once. The audience reacts, louder this time, more divided. Eddie nods slowly. Or maybe it's both. There's a pause. That answer doesn't shut anything down, but it doesn't fully agree either. One of the co-hosts smiles, sensing the balance. That's probably the most honest answer. A few laughs from the audience. Joy looks at Eddie, more curious now than confrontational. Do you ever worry about saying the wrong thing now? Eddie smiles. I think about what I say. I don't worry. That gets a strong reaction, applause, a few cheers. Joy presses gently. So no fear of backlash? Eddie shrugs slightly. If you're always afraid, you're not going to say anything real. The audience responds again, louder this time. Joy nods, but she doesn't fully agree. But being thoughtful isn't the same as being afraid. Eddie agrees. Exactly. That's why I said I think about it. There's a small moment of shared understanding there. But then Joy adds, I just think sometimes people use freedom as a shield. Eddie responds calmly. And sometimes people use accountability as a weapon. That line hits hard. The audience reacts immediately, louder than anything in the last few minutes. Some clap, some react with surprise, some go quiet. Even the co-hosts pause for a second. Joy doesn't look offended, but she definitely registers it. She leans back slightly, taking a breath before responding. That's a strong statement, she says. Eddie nods. It's an honest one. The audience is fully locked in again. Joy looks out at the audience briefly, then back at Eddie. Do you think that's happening more now? Eddie answers without hesitation. Yeah, I do. A few audience members clap again. Joy takes a second before responding. I think people are just tired of not being heard. Eddie nods. And I respect that. There's a pause. This one feels different, less like a standoff, more like a moment where both sides are acknowledging something real. One of the co-hosts smiles softly. I think what's interesting is that both of you are talking about the same thing, just from different angles. The audience murmurs in agreement. Joy nods slightly. Maybe. Eddie smiles. Probably. That gets a small laugh from the audience, easing the tension just a bit. But the weight of the conversation is still there. Another host looks toward the camera, then back at the table. This is one of those conversations that doesn't really have a clean answer. Joy adds quietly, "No, it doesn't." Eddie agrees. It's not supposed to. The audience claps, not loudly, but with a sense of appreciation. For a moment, it feels like things might settle into a more reflective tone. But then Joy looks back at Eddie and says one more thing, her voice calm but pointed. I just hope that as things move forward, the people who were hurt before don't get forgotten in the process. The room goes quiet again. Eddie nods slowly. And I hope that in trying to fix the past, we don't lose the ability to talk honestly in the present. That line hangs in the air. The audience reacts, not explosively but deeply. Some clap, some just sit with it. The co-hosts glance at each other. They know this isn't just a segment anymore. It's become something bigger. And you can feel it. They're right on the edge of either wrapping it up or going even deeper. There's a pause that lingers just a second longer than usual. The kind that doesn't happen unless everyone in the room knows something important just landed. One of the co-hosts finally exhales softly and looks toward the camera. I think this is one of those moments where people at home are probably having the same debate we're having right here. The audience responds with a quiet wave of applause, not loud but steady. Joy sits back in her chair now, her posture less forward than before. She's still serious, but there's a shift, less push, more reflection. Yeah, and that's not a bad thing, she says. Eddie nods. No, it's not. Another host leans in slightly. I think what's interesting is that this conversation didn't start as a debate, but it became one because it matters. A few audience members clap again. Joy glances toward the audience briefly, then back at Eddie. I'll say this, I don't think you're coming from a bad place. That line softens the room. Eddie gives a small nod. I appreciate that. Joy continues, but I also think impact matters more than intent in a lot of cases. Eddie doesn't jump in immediately this time. He takes a second, then responds. And I think both matter. That's all I'm saying. The audience reacts again, balanced, thoughtful. One of the co-hosts smiles. And that might be as close as we get to agreement today. There's light laughter from the audience. Joy smiles slightly too. Maybe. Eddie adds with a faint grin. That's a big maybe. The audience laughs more naturally now, the tension easing just a bit. But the weight of the conversation hasn't disappeared. It's just settled into something quieter. Another host looks toward Eddie. Before we wrap, I want to ask you this. After all these years, after everything we just talked about, what keeps you going? That question shifts the tone again, this time into something more personal. Eddie leans back, thinking for a moment. Honestly, the connection. When people laugh, when they feel something, that's always been the point for me. The audience claps warmly. He continues, and yeah, things change. The world changes. But that core thing, making people feel something real, that doesn't change. More applause. Joy listens closely, then nods. That's fair. There's a small moment of mutual respect there. Not full agreement, but recognition. One of the co-hosts turns slightly toward the audience. And I think that's why conversations like this are important. Because people do feel things differently. The audience responds again. The show begins to naturally wind down. You can feel the structure coming back in, the rhythm of a live broadcast nearing its end. But before it fully wraps, Joy adds one last thought. I think people at home are going to have a lot to say about this, she says, glancing at the camera. Eddie smiles. They usually do. That gets a light laugh. The co-host laughs too. That's definitely true. Then she looks directly into the camera. We're going to leave it there. But this conversation is clearly bigger than just this table. The audience claps as the segment officially ends. Eddie stands up, shaking hands with the hosts. Joy stands as well. There's a brief moment where they face each other again. Not tense, not confrontational, just a quiet acknowledgement. They exchange a few words off mic, both nodding slightly. The cameras pull back, the applause continues, and the show transitions out. But that's not where it ends. Because almost immediately after the broadcast, clips from the conversation start circulating online. Short moments, the key lines, the pauses, the reactions. Everything people felt in that room begins spreading across social media. Within minutes, hashtags start trending. Some people are fully backing Eddie, praising him for standing his ground and defending creative freedom. Others are siding with Joy, saying she raised necessary points about responsibility and impact. Clips of Eddie saying, "Understanding for everybody," and accountability can become a weapon, start getting shared everywhere. At the same time, Joy's lines, "Intent doesn't erase impact, and people are finally being heard," begin trending just as fast. The audience from the show starts posting their own reactions. Some say the tension in the room was even stronger than it looked on TV. Others say they appreciated that neither side backed down, but also didn't completely shut each other out. Media outlets pick it up quickly. Headlines frame it as a heated exchange, but viewers who watch the full segment start pointing out that it was more layered than that. Not just an argument, but a real conversation. Backstage, after the show, there's still a bit of that energy lingering. Eddie is talking with a producer, relaxed again, but clearly aware that the conversation is going to have a life beyond the studio. Joy is speaking with the other hosts, still engaged, still discussing points from the segment. Not in an argumentative way, but in that we're still thinking about it kind of way. There's no dramatic fallout. No one storms off. No raised voices behind the scenes. But there is impact. Because moments like that don't just disappear when the cameras stop rolling. Later that day, clips hit millions of views. Comment sections fill up fast, people debating, agreeing, disagreeing, sharing their own perspectives. Some viewers say it's one of the most honest conversations they've seen on daytime TV in a long time. Others say it highlights how divided opinions still are. And that's the thing, it didn't end with a clear winner. It ended with people thinking. And that's exactly why it keeps spreading. So now it comes down to you. Whose side do you agree with? Do you think comedy should evolve with stricter boundaries, or should it stay as free as possible, even if it risks offending? Was this a necessary conversation, or did it go too far for a daytime show? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear your perspective. And don't forget to subscribe to the Star Talks for more real talk show moments, debates, and stories just like this.